So, this Labor Day weekend, I went ahead and wrote a book. What the fuck y'all do? Y'all get anything accomplished? Y'all get drunk? Y'all get fucking pulled over by all these goddamn checkpoints? So, yeah, I wrote a book. It's more of a historical timeline. Well, it is a historical timeline, okay? And I'm going to explain what it is and why and what we can do with it, okay? So, of course, history, those who control the past control the future. There's also Diderot. He told that Voltaire, he complimented Voltaire on his teaching. He says some teachers actually just teach just to tell you a bunch of facts. Here's a bunch of facts. Now go memorize it. Now tell me what I just told you. But Voltaire, the way he taught, was to instill a hatred of hypocrisy, superstition, tyranny, lying, and something else. But basically 5 like really bad things that I think about a lot. So superstition, you know, fuck the superstitious bullshit, right? The hocus pocus voodoo type of fucking religious bullshit. Tyranny, oppression, domination over others, lies, ignorance. That's another one. Lies, ignorance, hypocrisy. So those who do unto others, but they don't have them do unto themselves, right? So fuck the hypocrites, fuck the ignorant, fuck the liars, fuck the superstitious and fuck the tyrants. So that's the point of history. That's the point of history. It's not just what the event was, but it's how we remember the event. Okay, so I wrote this book. It's called the Dark and Bloody Genesis of Kentucky, Volume 1. Okay. So, the Dark and Bloody Genesis of Kentucky. There's an important reason for me to actually write this. The major reason is because there's a large historical gap in the record. So, when it comes to a new history of Kentucky, Harrison and Clotter, right, which is the sort of the staple book for what they study in college, what I studied in college. That's the history of Kentucky. It comes from that book. But unfortunately, that book's pretty much, it's an apologist perspective. It's a white apologist perspective, and it's like white people didn't get to Kentucky about 1774, and this book is sitting there saying that it was just an empty, barren land waiting for white people to come in. There weren't permanent establishments. Nobody considered their homeland, which is horseshit. It's total fucking bullshit. And then even Wikipedia, which I typically have always defended because in college it's like, Wikipedia is not a good source. It's not a good, well, it is a good source. I like Wikipedia. I think it's one of the better sources out there. But also it's a good stem. It's a good body of work to start your research out. They reference everything that they say there, so you can, you know, see exactly where the information comes from. But they didn't let Ronnie Smith live on, right? So people killed Ronnie Smith in life, and then they try to kill his fucking legacy. And fuck Wikipedia. Wikipedia is sitting there telling me who the fuck is important and not important. Ronnie Lee Smith cured like 200 cases of cancer, but he was also the first libertarian to run for sheriff. The America is going to become Ronnie Lee Smith's America. He was treated like a dickhead. He was treated like a fucking asshole, even by people who are in agreement with him. His philosophy was like, it was the same as Rand Paul, but Rand Paul had money. So Rand Paul was able to fucking shove his fucking interest down stupid fucking Kentucky voters, but Ronnie Lee Smith told you the goddamn truth and you fucking lynched him for it. You killed him for it. They put like 3 felonies and, okay, so on and on and on. Yeah, fuck what y'all did to Ronnie Smith, right? So y'all don't care about your truth tellers, but that's not the point. I'm saying fuck Wikipedia on that front, and fuck Wikipedia on this front too, because when it comes to the history of Kentucky, I'm going to look it up right now, but when it comes to the history of Kentucky, again, it's just like the Harrison and Clotter thing. It'll mention something in 1765, and that's the first mention that they have of any type of historical facts in Wikipedia about Kentucky. So again, it's an apologist perspective. The Native Americans have been in Kentucky for 14,000 years. 14,000 years is how long Native Americans have been. White people have been here 1774, so that's 240 years ago. When you have a comparison between 240 years versus someone who's been here for 14,000, the people that's been here for 14 fucking thousand dollars has a greater claim to this land than the assholes that just fucking got here. It's just like the Palestine-Israel conflict, and actually that's sort of like one of the main things that pushed me to do this, because Americans are fucking white fucking asshole oppressor colonizers living on dark and bloody ground, pretending like these Native Americans didn't even exist. The history books, they fucking written them out of the history books. So they're genocided, and then their memories and legacies been genocided. So nobody even fucking knows what's going on. So history of Kentucky, See, they got the origin of the name, and then it goes settlement, right? Immediately goes for settlement. And that's how the history of Kentucky is. It's like the white people got here, and the reason why white people are easier to study is because they wrote a lot of shit down. So because they wrote stuff down, then people could read the stuff, rewrite it, put it into books. But because Native Americans were more of an oral culture and an oral tradition, a lot of that is, you know, is kind of off to the off to the wayside. But that doesn't mean it's not true or didn't happen. In fact, there's oral histories that's done out here for like people who can't write, or even the people that can write. It's easier just to kind of tell people what happened instead of having to write every word down and transcribing, you know, what the actual events were. So it says the settlement. They said they were talking about Beaver Wars. They mentioned the Beaver Wars, 1670. And then they said by the time settlers began entering Kentucky in the mid-18th century, there were no permanent Native American settlements in the region. Instead, the country is used as common hunting grounds, right, by the Shawnee from the north, Cherokee from the south, right? They had a nice agreement. It was a treaty. Basically, there's two countries, and no, fuck you. That's all fucking bullshit. So, and then it says Western tribes, the Iroquois Confederacy, also hunted there until 1776. So they start out with 1670s, and then they go up to 1768. So they barely touch on it. Then they go straight for Thomas Walker in 1750. So what the fuck happened before 1750? We don't know. Just a couple things here, a couple things there, but that's it. Nah, bullshit. A lot of fucking things happened in Kentucky before 1750. A lot of fucking things. So Wikipedia has got it wrong. The Kentucky history books have got it wrong. So there is a demand. There is an important reason for what I'm doing. I'm filling a historical gap. I'm filling a historical gap in the narrative of the state of Kentucky. Human beings have been here for 14,000 years. That's the history of Kentucky, starting from 14,000 years ago, from the time the first human being stepped foot on this ground. Kentucky is just the borders, right? Just the borders around Kentucky. And everything that happened in those borders, that's the history of Kentucky. The history of Kentucky isn't the white history of Kentucky. It isn't about the European, Protestant, Anglo-Saxon invaders. It's about everybody, and it's about, everybody collectively. So, yeah, so there's a large historical gap in the narrative of the state of Kentucky. So my timeline actually goes from zero to, or actually it goes from like 6 billion years ago, right? So that does kind of talk a little bit about the origins of existence, right? I go all the way back to the birth of the sun, but the specific reason, it goes to 1769. So the specific reason is, there's many reasons, but the specific reason I think is for the archaeological record, okay? So the archaeological records, if you're going to get into archaeology, you're going to start digging up all these different Indian burial mounds and finding all these trinkets, and they're going to be all over the fucking place. And if you read the history of Kentucky, you'll think that there was no fucking natives here. There were absolutely no natives, so why? So eventually every archaeologist realizes that the historians are fucking wrong. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. And then they have to go on. But if we had a good historical narrative, especially of, 1750 is all the fucking Wikipedia. So if we have better historical narrative of the 1500s, 1600s, and 1700s, I think we'll have a better understanding of what actually went on here in the Bluegrass State. And yeah, so I actually found there's 35 tribes that claim Kentucky as their main homeland, or a homeland at some time. So 35 tribes, or 35 Native American tribes. It's just a happy hunting ground. Nobody's fucking here at all. White people just came, and it's a Garden of Eden, right? Plush with berries and buffalo and waters and streams and creeks and lumber and all this other shit, caves to hide in. And there's no fucking Native Americans here in the Garden of Eden fucking using all this shit. Bullshit. Bullshit. They've been here for 14,000 fucking years. They're probably still here somewhere, right? And it's bullshit. It's total fucking bullshit. Just the onslaught of history kind of tells you that it's all bullshit if you just read fucking history. Starting from Christopher Columbus's genocide. Okay? So the history matters for a whole bunch of reasons. Kentucky kids, we only learn Kentucky history in the 4th grade. Well, 4th grade teachers don't have a good fucking solid foundation of what Kentucky is. They have a general understanding, right? And they'll probably give a picture where you'll see Yuchi, Cherokee, Chickasaw, and Shawnee, right? There's only 4 or 5 that they'll show. Here's some tribes. It's like an old map I've seen reproduced in many different ways, but it doesn't really go into who they were, what their culture was, and where they're at today, and what can we do today, because they have a historical justification to genocide all of us. We should be an integrationist society. We're the civilized one, but we're actually, the Europeans were some of the most bloody savages out there. So no, that's not fucking civilized. So actually, we need to be more integrationist, and we need to be more, you know, when I see the racism and the Confederate flags and the fucking, you know, the people saying nigger this, nigger that, it's fucking bullshit. It started out by being racist. It's still fucking racist today. It started out with genocide, and, you know, still genociding in Gaza, and the empire it's been expanded. They never stopped. Once Virginia got settled, then they just kept on taking land. They never stopped. In 1492, since 1492, you know, they've been imperializing and genociding. So that's the 4th grade, you know, so we're not being told the truth. We're not being told exactly what's going on. For archaeologists, if you go into the field, right, you got to know exactly what's going on, and you need to know the truth. So if you have a good history, a good foundation, you find an Indian mound somewhere, and you find, you know, these different sort of pottery and trinkets, then you have a more, you know, if you know a battle had happened there, if you knew that a tribe had actually lived there and existed there, then you have a better understanding, and you have a better, I guess, or better sort of a lead. You have got a good lead to know who the fuck and why the fuck that shit's actually there. So if you have a good historical narrative, that can only enhance the archaeology, right? So we can figure out more of what it is that actually is gone. The 1600s and 1700s, I got a lot of good information, but the 1500s and before, I didn't get so much. So I think Kentuckians do need to rectify that we live on dark and bloody ground, and that Kentuckians have been white supremacist genocidal maniacs since the fucking beginning. So why are there no black people in Appalachia? Why is Louisville, the chocolate city, only got 22% black population? Because Kentuckians are fucking racist as shit, okay? Fucking white supremacist fucking... Even Germans come into Kentucky and they say, fuck our German heritage. We're going to join this white supremacist heritage. And fuck that type of shit. You know, you are who you are. So if you came from Germany, then you got German origins, right? So it's not, you know, I don't, the nationalism, be American, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I like being an American, but if I'm just an American, does that mean I'm not a Kentuckian? No, I'm a Kentuckian American. You don't want me to hyphenate Kentucky? You want me to wipe Kentucky off the fucking American nationalism map? No, fuck you. This is my state, right? It's dark and bloody Genesis. It's got bad fucking origins, but, you know, we come up with a high five. You know, we came up with a high five, and, you know, we invented the radio. So there's some good things here. So the my idea of telling the truth is not so much just to say, oh, fuck you, Kentucky, but it's to get better. When only justice, there's no justice on stolen land, and if we don't know the truth, then there's no way we could actually see, you know, our conditions get better. So my historical timeline actually begins, like I said, at the birth of the sun, and I got several documents here, several like books that I want to go through. I just want to make sure I do it in, no, I guess I'll do it at the end, but okay. There's this People's History of the United States, or the world. This is what the Howard Zinn actually said he used for the world's history. Okay, so that's when it came to like from the birth of the sun all the way up till year 0. And also with the year 0, yeah, I had there's a question of whether or not there's a historical Jesus. So when it comes to, is there a historical Native Americans? Well, what's the basis that you think Jesus exists? You think Jesus existed? Why? Because somebody wrote it down in some fucking book? Yeah, well, religion, they're liars. That's what they do, is they fucking lie. So if you're telling me that you believe Jesus just because it was written down in the Bible, then you should, you know, believe every fucking thing that I just wrote. But that's stupid to believe anything that's just written just to fucking believe it. So, you know, you need multiple pieces of evidence. You need to sort of collab, and then also, you know, you got to figure it out for yourself. So I talk a little bit about Jesus and about the, you know, how do you know he's real, and then also it goes on to down the line. So if we can, you know, substantiate, you believe that Jesus exists, but there's no evidence. Why? Why you believe, and then you believe that there's no Native Americans, but there's plenty of evidence. So what the fuck? You're all believing in illusions, but you're not believing in the truth. And that's convenient for, you know, white people. The Christian missionaries did come over here, and they're like, hey, become Christians. Here's some blankets for smallpox. Pow, pow, pow. Give me your fucking land. You're dead now. So, you know, the KKK, that's a Christian organization. Hitler, the Mussolini, the Russian czars, there's the Crusades, the Spanish Inquisition, Christopher Columbus. This is Christianity, right? This is all about Christianity and about civilization and all this other bullshit. You know, that's no, you're not helping anybody by forcing your culture on them, especially since you're the fucking savage, barbaric genociders, okay? So the historical timeline starts out before the 1600s, and when I go to explain Kentucky, there's, you know, when it comes to like the 1500s, I got a lot of information 16 and 1700s, but when it comes to the 1500s and sort of the the Beaver Wars, there's not much about Kentucky specifically, so I had to sort of, you know, when it comes to early history in America, that we know a lot of shit that's going on, the tidewaters on the eastern seaboard, and we know about the Ohio regions and the Mississippi Valley and the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean islands and Florida, and we know a little bit about DeSoto, but we don't actually know about what's going on in Kentucky. And why is that? You know, I think there's actually a good explanation for it, because the geographical boundaries, you know, off to the east you got the Appalachian Mountains, in the south you got the Cumberland River, and then to the north you got the Ohio River. So you kind of have like a sort of triangle of like big natural, you know, natural sort of landmarks that's preventing people from actually migrating into it without actual, you know, without some great effort back in the day. So because Kentucky is situated between the mountains and the two great rivers, I think that's why the white folks weren't able to get into it until 1774. But we can understand what's going on. The Beaver Wars, you got Iroquois and the French and all these wars that's happening in the Ohio Valley, Ohio country. You know, it's in Canada, it's all to the side, but they're also kind of exploring down to the Mississippi River. You got Spanish conquistadors coming up through Mexico. And so, yeah, I mean, you can figure out what's going on. The general idea, the Iroquois were fighting a lot of fucking people, and then they said that they conquered all of, you know, Kentucky, but then how come there's no Iroquois? The Iroquois conquered them, but there was no Iroquois there? No, that's some bullshit, okay? So, there's water, there's food, there's lots of fucking Native Americans here. There's lots of evidence that there are Native Americans here, too. I found 35 tribes. The Shawnee, right? Did you know about the Shawnee? And there's like, you know, Muskegee, and then just go to the Sioux, Sioux, Chickasaw, Mazzapalia, the Creek, Shawnee, Chickasaw, Yuchi, right? So those are the biggest ones there, but there's 35 tribes that I was able to find. And there's something else I was wanting to say, but I've lost it as I went on. So, okay, so there's not much white documentation of what's actually going on in Kentucky. We get all the conflicts around that to give us an idea of what's going on. I threw in the Iroquois Beaver Wars, and also to understand the Iroquois, because according to the French and the British, that's all they were the fucking genocidal maniacs. They're so scary, right? So I wanted to kind of see different perspectives. So I took the Nipissing and the Susquehannock in Native Americans. And also the tobacco people and the hemp peoples, right? The hemp people, there's the Tuscaroras, the hemp peoples, and then there's the Piton, the tobacco peoples, right? So you got tobacco peoples, you got hemp peoples, you got the Nipissing and the Susquehannock, who's also existing in this time against most of the time it seems like the Iroquois is fighting all of these folks, but the Iroquois, it's a mixture of actually how the Iroquois is, because once they conquer you, then they adopt you into their tribe. Not like white people. White people didn't conquer you and then adopt you and make you a citizen like the Roman Empire did, right? Cuba's not, you know, when we took Cuba over, we didn't make them citizens. There's Guam. Guam is still, you know, it's American territory. We don't make them citizens. So I think we can actually learn something from the Iroquois and from the Roman Empire. The Iroquois also was the first democratic federalism in America. They also come up with there's a game, lacrosse. You know, I don't know if it's the Iroquois, but it's the Native Americans. Lacrosse is a game by a bunch of fucking preppy, you know, college students I saw, but it comes from a Native American thing, and it's like the Great Spirits game. So it's like God's game, right? Lacrosse is God's game for the Native Americans. So the Iroquois, they had a federalist system. There's 5 different tribes, and then they all united as one. Right, so you have the Oneida, Onondaga, the Cayuga, and the Seneca, Mohawk, and so since you have all 5 of those, and then the Tuscarora join in later on, but that's the same thing with America, right? You got 13 colonies, but 1 country, so you got 5 different nations or 6 different nations with Iroquois, but 1 big confederacy. You got 13 different nations with the colonies, but then you got the 1 United States. So that was stolen directly from the Iroquois. They were democratic before the United States were democratic, so the Iroquois were actually employing democracy and democratic values way before some of these genocidal maniacs came up. So these you're going to find out all this stuff in it, but this is good information to know. If you're Kentuckian, you should know your own history. You should know what this state, what all went on in this state. You don't say there's no Native Americans, but there's so many fucking arrowheads all over the fucking place. So, and then we got more streams and creeks than every other state out here. So we got more waterways, we got more trees, and then that's the time of buffalo and all the white-tailed deers and like the big sort of animals that was going on. And you're telling me nobody came in here? It's fucking bullshit. Or that it was just used as a hunting ground. So they would come here, hunt for a day and then throw it in their car and then drive on back to New York. Fuck, it's hard for me to get to New York. You're telling me Native Americans before automobiles were coming all the way down, hunting for a while and then fucking schlepping it over their back and then fucking going back? No, fuck off. That's bullshit. They're nomadic. They exist right where they're at. They're going to kill the thing. They're going to eat it right then and there. I also use the European conflicts because a lot of times the European conflicts would spill over into the North American colonies. You got King George and William's War, and then Queen Anne's War. So you got Queen Anne's War, King George, King William's War, and that was all different wars in Europe. It was like the War of Spanish Succession and some other stupid shit. But basically the Catholic Church and the monarchs and kings and queens just didn't have their shit together. And then because they didn't have their shit together, they would declare war on each other. And then that would be, if England and France is warring with each other in Europe, then the colonies would be in the back of their mind thinking that they could declare war on each other if they wanted to. They probably could declare peace too, right? Being so far removed from their the honky motherland, right? Or the honky motherlands. So we had lots of people, right? The Swedes, the Portuguese, the Dutch, the French, the British, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Dutch, Swedes, British. So you had a lot of imperialists that's coming over here. Right, so that's a historical timeline also. So it's the historical timeline, I wrote it up, is it's like a narrative. So you can read it, straight on through, but it's also a timeline. So you can read just the first couple of sentences, and if you want to read more, then you could read more. But it's a narrative. I think I wrote it fairly well enough to where it would be an fairly easy read, or to skim through it at least. But that's not the main use, okay? The main use for it. Oh, that's something I want to talk about. But the main use for it would be like if you had a research project and you want to know what happened in 1620s. If you want to know what happened in 1620s, you won't figure it out with Wikipedia. You won't figure it out with Harrison and Clotter or any of the history books. You'd have to get on, to get this timeline and see what happened with the 1630s, and then that'll give you a stem. Just like with Wikipedia, it'll give you a start, and then you can, do your project and get more into the detail and depth than what I actually got to. I don't like the term prehistory. Prehistory is that you're saying before history. So white people got here, now history began, but before white people it was before history. No, the history, prehistory just means before mankind. That's the way I think of prehistory. History is what we've done since we've been here on this planet. So what would be before history would be before we existed, but that might even be wrong too. It could just be all of existence, right? Before history, well, there's the Big Bang or God, if you believe in that. Well, what's before that, right? So prehistory would even presuppose or preclude. It would be before God. It'd be before God, prehistory. So fuck prehistory. That's such a fucking racist term, and it pisses me off. So fuck prehistory. The way that I actually divided the eras, and I think this is a good division because we live in a postmodern age, the internet generation, the millennials, has completely fucking changed everything, just like the Gutenberg printing press revolution. We got a Gutenberg printing press revolution for every individual out here. Okay, so that's a game changer. That's going to fucking change everything, how we interact, what's been going on, all the institutions and traditions. And good, it should, because fuck the fascism and fuck the genocide of fucking Native Americans and not giving a shit about one another. So the way I divided it is I got 3 eras. I got a postmodern era, I got a modern era, and then I got a pre-modern era. And the modern era, the way I've heard it many times, is just the chopping of the head of King Louis and Marie Antoinette. 1793, they chopped the heads off the king and the queen. These are the fucking biggest emperors, in the entire world. The French and the British Empire and the, Dutch, Swedes, all of them were fucking competing and vying for world power. But because they didn't make their own people happy, they had bread riots. Eventually, they got their fucking heads chopped off. And there's also the monarchical system, the kings and queens. And then America is established with the democracy. So with the kings and queens getting their heads cut off, and then with the, democracies being established, people would rather rule themselves instead of having some fucking, inheritance. Monarchs are like a bunch of ancestral fucking, losers that just inherited their fucking power. Are they good leaders? We don't know. The people didn't fucking decide. They just were born, into the family. And actually, since they're trying to keep the bloodlines real close, there's a lot of incest. And when you have a lot of incest, it actually makes the genetics weaker. So these, people that are being elevated into kings and queens have weaker genetics than, the average person out here who doesn't have sex with their own family, right? That actually, they do it the right way. So the eras that I have is the chopping of the head of Marie Antoinette and King Louis. Another reason why that's important is because of Louisville is named after King Louis. So, even though the French people hated that piece of shit and chopped his fucking head off, here in Kentucky, we're carrying his legacy on into perpetuity, right? You got Louisville, right? Yeah, Louisville. And even though I like, the L's, if it's like gun, when people do it like this, it's like, double loser, double loser. And then Louisville, who gives a shit? People, oh, you don't say it right. Don't say Louisville. It's named after King Louis, okay? So don't call it Louisville. You're supposed to call it real dumb like Lawville. And then actually, I don't hate that because, by bastardizing his name and we're saying, fuck Louis. Fuck King Louis. It ain't no fucking Louisville. That's fucking Lawville. It's fucking redneck town. So yeah. That's the pre-modern era. So from the birth of the sun until the chopping of the head of King Louis and Marie Antoinette. That's pre-modern history. Okay, modern history would be from that point on until 2000, until the invention of the internet, and then postmodern society would be from the invention of the internet on until today. That's the way. Those are the 3 biggest eras that I've divided up all human history in. And the genesis of Kentucky goes from the birth of the sun all the way to Marie Antoinette getting her head chopped off. I think October 16th. King Louis got his head chopped off in January, so we don't end the timeline until actually with Marie Antoinette. So yeah, the uses for this, again, is just sort of repeating some of my stuff, but just kind of bring the points home. Then I want to just show you the books that I used. It should be used. It's a historical timeline. It's very readable, so you can read it like a history book if you get into that type of information. I've put in a lot of good information into it. But I also think, more importantly, it serves as a general early history of Kentucky. It's also documenting a lot of dates, right? I put them all in numerical order. And I think that's the most valuable part of it, actually. So when you see, like I said, I was talking about the 1630s and the 1720s. If we needed to get information from a certain time period, then we would have an easy way to access the plethora of information info that's not listed on Kentucky Wikipedia or in the Kentucky history books. Now you got a historical timeline to find out what the fuck was going on in Kentucky in the 1630s. Yeah, so let's see what's going on in Kentucky in the 1630s. Okay, so just for instance, right? And I picked this randomly. I have no idea what actually happened in the 1630s. I know there's a Beaver Wars happened in the 1600s. It's a 100-year Beaver War. Iroquois just fucking kicking ass, kicking the French's ass, kicking all these Putin, the fucking tobacco peoples and a lot of the Iroquois-speaking peoples and nations. But there's also the smallpox epidemic, and they said it's a mourning war. So they lost a lot of people in their tribes, and their sort of religion says when a bunch of people in your tribe die, well, you gotta take other people's tribes, right? And they call it a mourning war. So if you're mourning and you're sad that people were dying, and your village was being depopulated, well, the only way you could solve depopulation was to invade and take over other nations. So I said, what, 1620s, Alright, so 1620s, there's 0 white people here, right? And the very first thing, Indian warriors needed guns to compete against the armed enemies. They needed beaver pelts to buy guns. As French missionaries and traders pushed west to the Indian country, Ottawa and Huron traders from the Great Lakes paddled their canoes down to Montreal and Quebec, eager to trade pelts for guns and metal weapons, and literally gave them an edge over their enemies. The Mohawks, together with the Oneidas, Cayugas, Onondagas, and Senecas, made up the League of the Iroquois, stretching the length of upstate New York, had to look elsewhere for guns and ammunition. The French wasn't going to sell any fucking guns to the Iroquois, since the Iroquois was their main competitor. But eventually, the Dutch are going to come in, and the Dutch are going to go ahead and sell guns to the Native Americans, and that changes the balance of power in North America. And the Dutch, that's Netherlands, German-ish, right? So that's the only nation actually I feel sort of connected with. These fucking British, I know I speak English, but like I said, I like how Kentucky bastardizes that fucking language. So even though the English like anglicizes everything, Kentucky bastardizes it. You know, it's only listen to the English of a Kentuckian, a fucking hillbilly, and then listen to an English of a fucking, you know, a proper Englishman spotted to you, blah blah blah. And then, oh, y'all don't know about the first shower going on down the River Creek and the bug the boo. So that's right. So it's like, are you all talking the same? It's the same fucking language, right? You're saying that's the same. You're saying that that's the same. Is that? Okay. So yeah, 1620s, right? So we learned about sort of the beginnings. Let's see if there's anything specific. There's a Jamestown massacre. It happened in 1622. So Jamestown's getting established, right? There was 1609, and then they brought slaves, 1619, and then within 3 years after bringing their slaves, there's a Jamestown massacre by the Powhatan. And then there's the Pamunkey. So I don't know if the Pamunkey, if that's the chief, because it's in quotation, but it's the Powhatan tribe, and they killed 347 English, the British people, right? The fucking Brits who fucking settled and occupied. They murdered 350 of them, right? Women and children throughout the whole colony. And nearly 1/3 of the English population of Jamestown was decimated in order to push, you know, the British out of North America. So that's you know, that's 1622, right? And so I could probably do that with any date. Let's go with 1657. What happened in 1657? And then actually the 1700s are way better, but 1657. And there might not even be 1657, you know? There might not even be one. Ah, there is. Okay, so the Democratic Iroquois Imperial Confederate War on the Erie Republic wipe out the Erie Republic as well as their nation off the face of the planet. So the Iroquois declares war against a lot of these neighboring tribes, and in 1657 the Iroquois wiped out the Erie Indians, the Erie, you know, Erie, Indiana, or the Erie Republic, wiped out that fucking nation, adopted whatever survivors were into, you know, the Iroquois League. So that happened in 1657, and that could be like it's any fucking date whatsoever. So that's the point. That's the use of it. Also, I think that's what I'll use it for too. So if I had to do some sort of report, well, you want to know about the 1670s? So again, it gives you a stem. It starts your, you know, it's only one sentence there. So what about the war against the Erie? Who's the Erie Indians? You know, where is this actually happening at? So there's more details that people can sort of get out of it, but it's a stem, and it gives you a beginning. And whereas, you know, there's a lacking. There's no historical record. Now there is one. The readability is, you know, 100%. You can skim it on through. Just read a couple things. Sometimes there's long ass paragraphs, but if you read the top and you don't, you know, basically that's the main point, right? I wrote it like a thesis, and then with all the, you know, the information underneath of it. So. Yeah, so of course, you don't have to read all the fucking paragraphs. That's why it makes it easy to read. You can kind of just say, oh, that happened. You can really skim on through. And if something catches your eye and you want some more information, you can, you know, read the information I provided there. There's some links too, some YouTube links. And where I got this information from, okay? So if the history books and fucking Wikipedia doesn't know what the fuck is going on, then how the fuck do I know, right? So I took information all across Google, searched anywhere and everywhere. Also got from all these books here. So I got information from all over the internet. I have links on there from Wikipedia too. So even though in the history of Kentucky, Wikipedia didn't mention, you know, anything that happened before 1750. Wikipedia did have a lot of things about the Beaver Wars and the Iroquois and shit like that. So I was able to kind of, a lot of it's Wikipedia, to be honest with you. So I was able to sort of piece all those, you know, pieces together. The books that I used Chris Harmon's People's History of the World. I used his beginning timeline. I think my beginning timeline is also fucking great, right? The history of the world. What does it start out with? You got Neanderthals. You got, you know, human beings busting out of Africa, you know, coming over the Bering Straits and shit. You got Neanderthals. You got a lot of our archaic digs and some other shit. So there's the beginning timeline. I think is like fucking wonderful. People's like, I don't know. If history began when Daniel Boone got here in fucking 1775, then everything beforehand doesn't matter. I think that's bullshit. I think every bit of it fucking matters. Okay, so the Shawnees and the War for America by Colin G. Calloway. This is another good book when it comes to, you know, whose state is Kentucky. I would say the Shawnee has the best claim of Kentucky than all the other ones. And the Shawnee were all fucking over the place, right? You have the Chenoa, Skippikitiki, and Waunee, some other villages all over the place. So the only permanent villages that people even acknowledged that existed were Shawnee villages. You had Jenny Wiley and the women who were getting kidnapped were Shawnee. Daniel Boone, his sons got murdered by the Shawnee. Battle of Blue Licks. James Boone got, you know, murdered by the Shawnee. Shawnee is just fucking everywhere, right? And I heard there was like thousands. There's like 3,500 to 4,000 in Kentucky. So I used those books In Search of Morgan Station, Harry G. Enoch. And actually, yeah, I guess I got 2 books by Harry G. Enoch. So In Search of Morgan Station, he mentioned something about Tecumseh. Tecumseh was a Shawnee, right? That was what we saw a picture of. But In Search of Morgan Station, he mentioned something about Tecumseh and the Ward brothers, who were the Ward brothers are actually a fascinating bunch because one of them goes fight for the natives and the other one fights for the British, and then eventually they're actually like on opposite sides of each other, fighting in, you know, brother versus brother. So the American Revolution was very much brother versus brother. So I don't see where the harmony actually ever really came. The Skippikitiki is in Clark County. That's you know, that's where the last Shawnee village is. And this book is pretty good, so I got some, it's got a lot of first-person sources in it, so I took some quotes out of it. Here's another book that I had. I like the beginning of it. It was more narrative, so more just sort of telling a story, and it was right, you know, it's 100%. So this Ted Franklin B. Lew, he knows his Native Americans pretty well. How the West Was Lost, Stephen Aaron used this book here. That's a pretty good book. It talks about the transformation from Daniel Boone to Henry Clay. So Daniel Boone, you know, he has slaves and he killed Native Americans, but there's also a self-sufficiency, being out in the woods, taking care of himself, right? Daniel Boone was a man, a great big man. But again, he killed Indians, he had fucking slaves, so he doesn't get past it. But when it goes to Henry Clay's just an aristocrat with his fucking plantation and just his aristocracy, fucking stuck up fucking bullshit. So whereas we started out by being a nation of being self-reliant, sort of, you know, the Yeoman, the fucking strong, just take care of our agrarian nation, right? We take care of our own, we'll be strong, to a more aristocratic sort of, we're the controllers and the oppressors and you're beneath us. So that's, the West was lost, right? Kentucky would be the first West. You have the 13 colonies, and when people said, let's go fucking west, they went into Kentucky. So Kentucky would be the first state of the imperialism of the Americans, right? The 13 colonies would be the imperialism of British, the colonialists, but the imperialism into Kentucky would be the imperialism of the Americans. And then it didn't stop, right? So once they established Harrodstown in 1774, which was, you know, we've only been here 240 years. White people have only been in Kentucky for 240 years. So it's not a very long time, but once they got themselves established there, then they just kept on going, right? Took the Louisiana Purchase, and then took fucking Mexico, and took California, and then, you know, Alaska, and Guam, and Puerto Rico, and now we got 900 military bases in 153 countries, so we're an empire. We're bombing Pakistan and Yemen, and letting Gaza genocide fucking happen willy-nilly, and ISIS and Iraq, and my God, Jesus Christ, we can't police the world and we shouldn't take over any more fucking land. I'm happy. I'm happy where I'm at. I don't think empire helps me. I don't think genocide in Native Americans help me. I wish I knew some Native Americans. That would be nice. I don't ever see any Native Americans anywhere, but they're the original peoples, and so I think I like their soulfulness, their spirituality. Tecumseh had a speech. He was sitting there saying, they're all about capitalism and taking the resources and taking the land, but how can you sell the earth? How can you sell the water? How can you sell the air? This is all of our stuff. How can you take this shit and just say that it's yours and nobody else's? This is all of our stuff. How can you sell the air? How can you sell the land? How can you sell the water? Well, we're capitalists. That's how we fucking do it, right? Take the shit and say, fuck you, pay me, right? If you want to live, you want water, you have to. And now we don't hunt, we don't fish, right? We were sort of dependent upon the system that has been created. And then I got some of the information out of Daniel Boone's own personal narrative. So he wrote, he penned some of his experiences. And you can't avoid Daniel Boone. So as much as I want to hate the man, the beginning of Kentucky, he's so essential to the beginning. So with Henderson, Transylvania Purchase, and also he gets fucked over. He gets fucked over in his lands, and he dies in Missouri. He gets a lot of land, so he's taken care of. It's not like he's dies of slaps, but he didn't, being such a fucking Daniel Boone National Forest, right? So the entire, there's like fucking maybe 1,000 so acres and maybe more in eastern Kentucky that's dedicated to just him, and he didn't get any land in Kentucky, but he's got a whole fucking forest today. So yeah, fuck Daniel Boone, don't get me wrong on that, because Daniel Boone is sort of, by making him heroic, then you say, well, yeah, he killed Indians, but who cares? No, he fucking killed Indians, and that's fucking bullshit, right? He's invading in other people's land. He comes in, 1775 is when he establishes himself, right? So that's right at the onset of the Revolution. Transylvania Purchase, it's almost like the American Revolution was all about Kentucky. They wanted that fucking land. They didn't want British to fucking head it. Henderson and Daniel Boone went ahead and made a purchase from the Cherokee, so there was a contract on the table, and Virginia makes it a county, and they kind of take it over. But that's, because of that Transylvania Purchase, that forces the royal governor and the British Virginia to actually create Kentucky County. So Kentucky was created because of Daniel Boone and Richard Henderson. Like I said, they had fucking slaves. They, hey, come here, slave, come here, boy, do this, do that. Hey, there's an Indian, kill, kill, kill. So, that you cannot forget that shit. You cannot fucking forget that shit. And I think also there's a Native American motto or a Native American quote that says, when you speak of the dead, when you say their name to the earth, they're still alive, which to me just says that we, the people, carry on the memories of everybody else. So there's like Kako Wachaki, and then there's Skippakittiki, Shanoa, and Wani. There's so many Native Americans. Chief Pride, Chief Pipe, White Eyes. There's so many, Delaware. Just even naming the Native Americans. Like I found 35, and I'll list 35 off at the very end. Here, I think I'm actually about finished here. So that's yeah, so that's the information. That's so Genesis of Kentucky, Volume 1, the Dark and Bloody Genesis of Kentucky. I did take some notes because I'm taking all the timeline, and I do want to finish, like, the history of the whole thing, but this was the main point. It took me 2 weeks. I thought it was only going to take me, it was like way too fucking long. I got other shit to do. I can't be, but I wrote a book, so good, yay, right? Let's see. So there's the last thing. There is one lie. There is one lie. I'll straight up tell you that there is one lie. So that actually makes it more fun. Can you spot the lie? There's 170 fucking pages. Which one is the lie? And it won't fuck up anything because it's so obvious. I feel like if it does get carried on, it's for a good reason and a good purpose. But if it doesn't, I'll even give you a hint. It's in the 1700s. Okay, so that guarantees that everything before 1700s is 100%. Everything else is 100%. And yeah, so it's purposely done as a purposeful lie. I got my reasons, but see if you can find it, right? Just if it's written down, it must be true, right? The fucking British, they think they're so smart, pish posh, all hail the Queen, which is like a spot tea. The fucking Queen hated Princess Diana, right? The people's fucking princess. So if the British are so smart, then how come it took a Kentuckian to come up with sweet tea, right? They've been drinking tea all their fucking lives, but Kentuckians are the ones that said, hey, let's put some sugar in this goddamn drink. And now we got sweet tea. Would you like a sweet tea? And that's it. Okay, so good. Good. So that's the genesis of Kentucky. I'm proud of myself. I wrote a book, right? I get to brag and say, hey, I done something. I accomplished something. And let's go to the 35 tribes that claim Kentucky as their homeland. Because again, to the earth, if we say the name of the people, it's the living that keep the memories alive, right? So, what Native Americans were here in Kentucky? Well, let me tell you. You had the Muskegans speaking Chickasaw, the Algonquins speaking Shawnee, Cherokee, the Yuchi, who is living by the Green River, so also Green River Indians, Iroquois speaking Yuchi, Iroquois speaking Wyandot, who's also made up of the Huron and the Piton, the tobacco people. They went into the Wyandot tribes, the Mazopalia, which I think is Creek Indians, maybe? No, that's Muskego, Muskegee. So the Muskegee, and then you also got Mazopalia, the Mingo, who's Seneca of the Iroquois, deflected Seneca, the Chippewa, one of the council of the Three Fires. You actually have all council of the Three Fires, the Ottawa and the Piankishaw. So you got Chippewa, Piankishaw, Ottawa, the Lenape, also called the Delaware. They're Algonquin speaking Lenape, Miami Algonquin speaking Miami, the Yamacraw, the Eel River Indians. The Haudenosaunee, which is the Democratic Iroquois Imperial Confederacy, Haudenosaunee, the Kaskaskia Indians, Kickapoo, Ottawa, Piankishaw, Potawatomi, the Wea, Tutelo, Illinois, Lanapota, Creek, Muskegon speaking Creek, Ojibwa, Haudenosaunee Carinons, the Carinons. This is LaSalle. LaSalle was like, hey, there's a bunch of Haudenosaunee Carinons. And then there's Outagamie, which is also known as the Fox tribe. Iskosogos, the general Iroquois name for Western Algonquins. Tugehas, Mohawk Iroquois speaking Mohawk, Muskegon speaking Choctaw, Tutelo speaking Chaponi, Tutelo speaking Sioux, the Ponca, and the Crane Indians. So the Ponca, where the fuck is the Ponca? I've never heard of the Ponca, the Crane Indians, and then have some of these bigger Iskosogos. But Iskosogos? What are the Iskosogos? So there's 35 Native American tribes that are indigenous at some point in time to Kentucky. Might even the Sioux say that this is where they started out. So a lot of them are claiming that this was the land that they had began on. And it makes sense. It's so plush with game and water and resources. Why the fuck would you not? If you're a Native American, why would you like go out in the desert, right? Why would you live out in the, or a mountaintop? Why would you go into like places that don't have, all the resources? It makes no sense whatsoever. So fuck the historians, fuck Wikipedia, and yeah. So learn something about Kentucky. Kentuckians, I guarantee you that actually, if I can make a test off this stuff, that 95% of Kentuckians don't know shit about themselves. Not even the governor. Or Eric Comer, or any of the people that's going to be running for governor. They don't know shit about themselves and know shit about the states. And again, Diderot to Voltaire, why do we learn this shit? So we can say, fuck the tyrants, fuck the superstition, fuck the ignorance, fuck the lies, and fuck the hypocrisy. You don't want to be genocided, you don't want to be murdered, then don't fucking support genocide and murder. You don't want to be lied to, you don't want people to be hypocritical to you, forcing you to do shit that they wouldn't even do, then don't do it to other fucking people. So that's, yeah, Genesis of Kentucky, Volume 1. The Dark and Bloody Genesis of Kentucky. Read it, check it out, learn something about yourselves and about the state. It's fucking Kentucky.